the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
Running back in the portal and Trevor Etienne. What does Trevor Etienne going to Georgia mean for the Georgia Bulldogs running back room in 2024, Matt Green?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's huge. You look at Georgia's roster now. I mean, on the offensive side, you got a Missouri transfer at wide receiver. They brought in London Humphreys from Vanderbilt. Like, you just brought in a South Carolina defensive lineman. Now you're bringing in a Florida running back on top of a Miami wide receiver too, and a Mississippi State wide receiver from a year ago. So Georgia's really just going all over the SEC to fill their skill positions. And Trevor Etienne, I don't think he's a superstar by any means. I was a little surprised that you said he's number one running back in the portal. I think Raheem Sanders is probably better if we're splitting hairs, but Trevor Etienne, I think he's a dynamic player, and Georgia, as well as they've recruited and everything, and they have good players. It feels like the past two seasons, like Kenny McIntosh was a stud. So outside of like James Cook and Zamir White, like they weren't Sony Michel and Nick Chubb and DeAndre Swift or anything, but those were two good players, like very good players that were drafted, second, fourth round in the NFL. This 2023 team just didn't have that in the backfield. Dejon Edwards is a good player. He just doesn't have that top end speed. Kendall Milton seems to have all the talent in the world, but he just can't stay healthy. And that at some point, that's all that matters. So there was something lacking. Branson Robinson showed a little bit, and obviously he missed the whole season. And, it wouldn't surprise me if Etienne comes in and has roughly the same numbers he did at Florida and kind of splits carries. He's not like a clear number one guy at Georgia, just because the way they kind of tend to spread the wealth. And I think Georgia has recruited really well, and they'll bring in 3 true freshmen in this class, including Nate Frazier, I think is the number one running back according to some. So Georgia's running back depth is definitely going to be, or running back just group, I think is going to be deeper next year. And Etienne is definitely the most proven, I think, of the bunch.
It's interesting because it's just a different era, right? Like Georgia's got a really just versatile room. Like, how would you view next year? Like, if you had to guess what the rotation looks like, I obviously will see, but I mean, they're pretty much done in terms of portaling and recruiting on the running back side. So what would you estimate is going to be the running back room? And also, what would you prefer it to look like going into next year?
Do we know if Dejon Edwards is back? I think he's got eligibility, but it can almost be like an Elijah Holyfield situation. Like, this is probably the best season you're going to have, just based on the circumstances. But he just doesn't seem like a top end, like an NFL running back or anything. But he was a good player. So, you're going to lose Milton. I think you're going to lose Edwards. Etienne, I think he's the most proven running back in that group. And then, like I said, with Branson Robinson, he's probably second, but obviously he's got to come back. It was an ACL, right, that he tore. So, he's got to come back from that. And then Roderick Robinson, pretty unproven as a true freshman. Andrew Paul, another one who got hurt as a freshman in 2022 and came back in this year. And, he barely played. So there's a lot of unproven guys in Georgia's backfield. I mean, that's why Dylan Bell came in and honestly was one of the more impressive running backs. Cash Jones, you got to throw out there, the walk-on. But yeah, I think the 3 true freshmen, I think any of those guys, if they're a real playmaker, I think they could definitely get ticks next year because it's a pretty unproven backfield. But I think Etienne, he doesn't necessarily have to carry the load, but he's definitely the most proven coming in.
Yeah, and it's also, we just don't really know. Like this, it's interesting, like how the Georgia just running back room has shifted and just how we view them. Like it's going to be a multitude of guys. Like it's just not going to be a lead back and just this power run through. They're not going to be a run first offense. Like you look at where they're looking in the portal, right? Like you mentioned, they get the Miami kid. They bring in Dominic Levick last year. You bring in Ra Thomas last year. I mean, you're going to be very portal heavy in your skill position guys. You obviously target the tight ends a bunch, so it'll be Lawson and Delp a lot in the tight end spots. And you see early pictures of Jaden Riddell, and he's gigantic, so I wouldn't doubt on him finding his way into the field sooner rather than later in Georgia. But it's just they're a pass-first team now, but they also are going to be loaded in the backfield with options with Frazier, with Etienne, with even Dylan Bell, who can go back there if he wants to. There's options, but like you said, Dejan Edwards, I just don't see him having a better year than what he just had at Georgia if he comes back for another year. I think this running back room is going to be really crowded for him to stay in front, especially with Robinson too coming back from injury.
For sure, and I feel like there's this one one section of Georgia fans that are like obsessed with tight ends that have just always been like, get the tight end the ball. That's what we need to do. We got just good tight end. It's like very rarely is a tight end the best playmaker on your team. So no, I don't care about the tight end. Get it to those dynamic receivers. For the last 3 years, Georgia's best playmaker has been a tight end, and that's why they fed the tight end. So I think it'll be interesting to see kind of how they use their weapons next year, because Brock Bowers is doing a lot of slot receiver stuff. He was doing a lot of running back stuff. So they're going to have some of these guys step into his role. And I mean, we know how Georgia recruits. They get some big time players. So I think they'll have, I don't know who the guys are going to be necessarily. It's a lot of like Rosemy Jack Saint is going to be gone. So he was one of the leading receivers. McConkey possibly could be back. He could be gone. So
that man, they just need to send him on. Like, sir, you're not going to be able to walk by the time you get the NFL if you come back for another year, sir. Like, you've been banged up the last 2 years going into the end of the year. It's time to move on, lad.
You exaggerate how much he's been hurt. He didn't miss like any games in 2022.
Well, hold on. I'm not saying he was hurt the whole time. I'm saying the last 2 years he has finished hobbled and broken at the University of Georgia.
I would say this year he was hurt coming into the season, and he was kind of hobbled a lot of the year. But so I would argue his stock is not as high as it was coming into the 2023 as it is coming out of 2023. So, he could easily come back, and with Carson Beck, with the rapport he's got with a returning starting quarterback, and easily have a better season. Brock Bowers is gone. Like, there's a lot of touches to go around with a guy like Bowers being gone. So, I wouldn't guarantee that McConkey is gone. So, and with how many years some of these guys are playing, I think he's still got something left. But obviously, I think he would be drafted if he goes pro. So, we'll see.
Oh, yeah. I've seen Ladd in the first round by some mocks. Like, Ladd's a type of receiver who should.
Ladd's not going in the first round. What?
Ladd's a kind of he's like one of those dudes who, if he's healthy, like, he's gonna produce at the NFL level. Like,
if
Ladd
he goes
McConkey,
to the combine and runs like a 4.3 flat or something, then yeah, maybe he goes in like the second round. But I think he's a good piece, but he doesn't seem like a guy that's better than like a third, fourth round at best.
I mean, second round would not surprise me with Ladd McConkey at all.
Hey, I love Ladd McConkey. So
December 9th, I'm looking at this right now. He's predicted to go 56th overall.
Hey, I'm here for it. He deserves it, but I don't know. So he could be gone, and so Georgia could be replacing Bowers and McConkey next year. So,
but the whole point is this is why you brought in Dominic Lovett. This is why you paid to bring in Lovett. Like, he should fill that spot. Like, I feel like Don Draper with Mad Men. That's what the money is for. Like, Dominic Lovett should step up and be that guy, and you shouldn't miss a beat.
What are you talking about? He's trying to. We're paying Dominic Lovett to get him to come to Georgia. Is that
what I'm saying is, like, that's how portaling is. Like, portals, that's what it is. Like, a lot of it is just, and I think a lot of it's
transferring to a better situation and getting better playing time and getting with a better ticks, more touches, whatever the case may be. Like, I think Georgia's just better than Missouri, and if Georgia wants you, you'll bounce on Missouri.
I don't know. Missouri's pretty feisty this year, Matt Green.
I mean, he made the wrong choice. Better than Missouri, like.
Well, no, he had a worse season. Like, Dominic Lovett made a bad decision going to Georgia. Like, as of right now, Dominic Lovett made a bad career choice because he was a much better player. He led the SEC the year prior at Mizzou. Luther Burden obviously just had a great year at Mizzou. Cody Schrader had a great year.
Huh? He didn't have as good as stats, but that's debatable that he made a bad career choice.
Well, I mean, he had a worse year. Like, he was featured significantly less. Though. I mean, he should have stayed at Mizzou
with better players.
Yeah, that's why you. But that's why you stay.
Better than him.
Yeah, I don't understand that. Like, that was one where I was like, what was wrong with your situation? You're featured, you get Luther Burden with you. Y'all are both going to put up great numbers, and you're going to go in the NFL. Like, what do you? I never understood that
I mean,
one.
George is better. He can play at Georgia.
Receivers don't play well. Like, those big time receivers just don't. No, they're just not.
But that's what you're not. I'm not. You're losing me. They don't. It's not like they don't play well. They don't put up huge numbers. But like they had a tight end that was putting up huge.
But that's
numbers.
My point. He knew Brock Bowers was there. He knew the offense. And he still made the jump. I'm saying it was a bad career move for him to go from Mizzou to Georgia. And as of right now, it's been a huge miss for him. Not for Georgia, because Georgia was a great team and was one of the best teams in college football all year. But Dominic Lovett specifically was an L. Ra Thomas, I think, was a win. I think that was a better career move for him. And I think
but he had way worse stats than he did the year before at Mississippi State.
Ra-Ra's going to start, though, next year. And I mean,
Lovett he'll play just as much as Ra Thomas, if not more.
I don't know. Who would you bet on to have a better year? I bet on Ra over Lovett next year.
I mean, Lovett had a significantly better year this year. I mean, I think he was second among the receivers in yards this year.
Did it feel like it, Matt Green?
I mean, part of it, though, is everyone doesn't count Brock Bowers as a receiver. So it's like, it's weird having these conversations with people like social media, like people cherry picking like Georgia's wide receiver production. It's like, yeah, but they had a tight end that had like double-digit touchdowns, like 800 yards or something. You know what I mean? And he missed multiple games. So I don't know. I think Georgia, obviously, his stats were going to get worse at Georgia, but I think that's kind of part of the Georgia thing. You kind of buy into the team, and maybe you don't get the stats, but you're getting developed and all of that. So I mean, They preach the whole team thing. Your stats are going to take a hit. It's just not really Georgia's thing. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to say he's taking an L. Like, I mean, yeah,
1 catch, 9 yards against Tennessee, 2 catches, 23 yards against Alabama, 4 catches, 33 yards against Mizzou. He did have a TD there. I don't know. It was okay. Better year though, significantly. He almost doubled his yardage the year prior and averaged 15 yards a catch at Mizzou. I don't know. We'll see how he does next year. But
yeah, I mean,
as
it
of right
definitely
now,
wasn't as good of a. Definitely not as good as stats for sure.
Matt Green, the college football, or before we get into the college football playoff, the top 10, the Matt Green power poll. We were thinking about different things we were going to do this offseason as we gear up for
power poll.
Yeah, the Matt Green power poll here. The best 10 teams, Matt
power
Green.
poll.
The Matt Green power poll. The best teams this year were who? I'm curious from Matt Green, the college football analyst, the best 10 teams for you in the Matt Green power poll this year, Matt Green. 10 through 1. How do you do it?
I feel like people overthink these power rankings here. I'm just going. You're not gonna like this. I'm not gonna overthink this. It's gonna look very similar to the current rankings, but this is what the rankings should look like. The current rankings. You may start at. Did I lose you?
No, I'm listening.
You may start at 1 or start at 10.
Start at 10. We're going 10 to 1.
All right, let's start at 10. At number 10, we got Ole Miss. Just missing the top 10 we got is Penn State. You look at Ole Miss and Penn State, 2 teams, both went 10-2.
Go. Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.